All right. So before we get started with creating our joints, we really need to make sure that our characters are kind of optimized, that our scene's nice and clean, and we're ready to go. Opening this scene, I instantly recognized or instantly saw a couple of places that I could definitely tidy up. One being these reference images. I don't need these anymore. I've built my character. Okay? So I'm definitely going to be deleting these. Then I don't have to worry about my Maya scene trying to find them again. If I want, I can always re-import them later on. But at this stage, I'm pretty happy with my model. I'm pretty happy with my textures. And I'm just looking forward to moving through into animation. So I'm going to get rid of my image planes. So I'm going to open up my outliner, first of all, locate those two image planes, which are image plane 1 and image plane 2, and I'm just going to hit delete. Just clearing my outliner up and making it really, really easy to find everything. Okay? Some of you guys may have shapes checked. If you can all go to display and make sure shapes are unchecked in your outliner, please. Otherwise, it'll add a whole lot of extra things that we don't really need to deal with at this stage. So make sure shapes is unchecked. And you should just be greeted by the geometry of your character. Once you've deleted those image planes, just the geometry left in your outline. Okay? If you see things other than your geometry, it generally means that you have history on one of your objects, so you'll need to find that object and delete history, or it could just be an empty group. Okay, and what an empty group might look like is this here, group 1. It has nothing associated with it. If you click it and you move it and nothing happens, just delete. Okay? Just get rid of that group. You may have accidentally created it. Maya may have created it for yourself. We'll never know. So just hit delete on that. Now I've already gone through and I've already deleted the transformations on my character. But just to give you guys an example, some of you, and this often happens, I still do it. I'll select an object and I might accidentally hit my middle mouse button as I'm moving away or moving my cursor away. And what that's going to do is move my geometry ever so slightly. I'm just going to get a very small value. So just make sure you go through and zero out or freeze the transformations on all of your geometry. So that's not just your hair, not just your character, but any eyebrows they have, any eyeballs they have. If they have teeth, make sure that those are all zeroed out. All the transformations are frozen. There's no history on them. Okay. The only input that you guys should see is your smooth. Okay? And even at this stage, we don't necessarily need it. You can delete the smooth as well if you want. And we can always apply that later. For the purposes of rigging, we'll probably be leaving smooth off. So it's by no means a loss if you do delete your smoothing. Just make sure when you do delete your history, you're not deleting it while you have division 2 on smooth, because you'll find that your geometry is pretty busy, is pretty dense. You want that to be very minimal. Excuse me. All right. So looking at my outliner now, the outline is going to be a major part of our rigging pipeline. So I'm actually just going to open that up as a second panel. So I recommend you guys do the same thing. I'm just going to go panel, sorry, what am I doing? Layouts, sorry, 2 panels side by side. I'm going to make my right panel perspective, and I'm going to make my left panel under panels. I go to panel and just click outliner. For some of you guys, you may have that shortcut on the left-hand side under the layouts navigation. And I'll just shrink that up. If you prefer the floating window, that's absolutely fine. I will try to keep my floating windows on my screen so that you guys can see them. And definitely when I finish talking, you can start having floating windows all over the show. Cool. All right, so I've got Hector. He's looking not too bad. The outline is fairly clean. At the moment, though, I have 4 groups or four shapes or 4 objects in my outliner. I have my eyes group, eyebrows group, teeth group, and the Hector body. Okay, I want to put these all together into one group. And I can do that by just selecting the top level of each group. So eyes group, control selecting eyebrows group, control select teeth group, and control select geo body. With all 4 selected, I'm just going to hit Control G on my keyboard for group. I believe that's also located under Edit, Hierarchy Group. So you can select the group. And that's just going to merge them all into one group there. And I'm just going to call that Hector Geo. So I've got a group there called Hector Geo Group. That's ideal for me because it means that at any point, if I want to, I can just hide that character as a group, or I can go through and select any part. I know where every part or every piece of geometry is going to be on my character. It's going to be under that group. Right. One more thing, and I know this is something that's probably quite common across the board, is down here under display layers, I imagine everyone has at least a couple of these, okay? I've got a whole bunch from a demo that I did earlier for you guys. I know that all of these are empty, all of these layers, and moving forward into rigging, I actually want everyone to clear their layers completely. So go through and delete all of your layers down here. If you delete a layer and it deletes some objects, just Control Z, and we'll take you'll right click on that layer and go down to empty the layer. It'll say it, if there is an object in the layer, it'll say, that'll be highlighted, and you can just click empty the layer or remove selected objects if you have them selected in your viewport. But otherwise, just go through and delete all your layers. So we should be greeted by nothing down here. Also, our render. Yeah. The base? Is that the only place it exists, or is it in a separate? If you do have the base in your file, guys, that's fine. Just leave it. Just hide it. Turn the visibility of that layer off. That's fine. And under your render layers, we should only have a master layer. If you have your occlusion layer in there, please delete that as well. All right. Now, some people got notes about naming their shaders in the Hypershade. I won't go through that. You guys can do that in your own time. I would like to move on to setting up some joints. Okay. Once I'm happy with my file, once I'm happy and it's all clean and tidy, I'm going to name it appropriately. So I'm going to save it. I'll save it, first of all. And then we're going to save it as something that I can easily recognize. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to save it as, at the moment it's called Hector UVs. I'll name it something more appropriate, something such as Hector mod, maybe. Okay? And basically what that's telling me is that that is a finished model ready to be taken into the rig, be rigged. Okay? So I'm just going to click Hector mod for the time being. I may change the name later on. You guys can call it whatever you like. It just has to be something that you can recognize and something that you know is your finalized model. But please don't put final model. Okay? Never name something final. I can almost guarantee you in all my experience, if you call something final, it will come back to you for changes. I don't know why, it just always happens. And I'm just going to save that. So now I have a file called Hector_mod. And I'm going to open up a new file. So I'm just going to go new scene or control new, and we should end up with a nice blank canvas. This blank canvas will form the basis of our rigging scene. Okay. Because we've created a finalized model, we don't really want to tweak that model. We don't want to do anything that could potentially damage that model. So we're going to reference it in. Okay. We're going to reference it in. It's just going to be in our scene for as long as we need it. We can always remove it if we need to. Okay. Is everyone following so far? If you do have any questions, just shoot your hand up. We are going to walk through this. Like I said, we're going to be doing this a little bit differently, taking it step by step. I am recording, but if there's something urgent that I can answer, just shoot your hand up and I'll answer it. Right? We're going to go File, Create Reference. Now we've already been through referencing, and it's not going to be any different to the references we've created previously. When we do move into animation, however, I'll be taking you through a slightly more advanced referencing system. But for the time being, we're just going to go through the standard. We're going to call it Hector Mod, or we're going to select our Hector Mod, and we're just going to reference that in. And what we have is a character ready to be rigged. Now, this character should be on the grid. Okay, so I've done that incorrectly. So what I'd need to do is actually grab my entire model and lift it up to the grid, but I would do that in the original file. Okay. In fact, I'm going to do that really quickly. So I'm just going to select that entire group, select my grid. I'm just going to move him up, make sure that he is, in fact, in contact with origin 000. Looks pretty good from here. And I'm just going to freeze that transformation. I don't want any transformations on the group there. And I'll save that, open a new scene, and create my reference. So we should all be up to about the same point now. Now hopefully you've all got those sheets in front of you where you constructed your skeletons on paper. They're going to come in a lot of handy. In a lot of handy, good sentence. So the joint creation system it's another drop down. So we're going through another tool set. We've worked with modeling and now we're stepping down to rigging. Okay? We've kind of dabbled a little bit with rendering. We will be going into animation after rigging. Effects is something that you guys will do more later down the track. Okay? So everyone change your drop down to rigging and we get a new selection of tools along the top here. The most important one, the one that we're interested in, is skeleton. Okay. And I want to create some joints. Okay. And I'm just going to show you really quickly. I'm just going to select these joints and start creating and show you what we need to avoid. So I'm going to create some joints, and I want approximately that joint in about the hip position and a couple going up the spine. Now I can't see these, right? It's a bit of a hassle. But I'm just going to continue anyway, and I'm going to give a couple in the neck, go up to the head, and I'm just going to hit enter on my keyboard to say that I'm done. Now in my mind, I'm sure that this is going to work perfectly, but as I rotate around, I realize not so much. Joints are a very peculiar thing. You can't really build them in a perspective view, okay? Because they will align to the camera perspective. When we create joints, we do need to work primarily in our orthographic views. Occasionally, we can jump into our perspective view to make adjustments, but not necessarily to create. Okay? So I'm just going to hit spacebar to open up all 4 views on my character, and I recommend that you guys do the same. So hit spacebar, bring your character up, and if you hover over the viewport and hit F, each of these viewports, it's going to resize your character to fit in the viewport. Okay. Handy tip. I'm going to go through and turn all the grids off because the grids annoy me. You're welcome to do the same. You're also welcome to leave them. Artist's choice. Now, one thing that I noticed before is that I couldn't see my joints when I was trying to create them in my character. Okay? So one way I can fix that is by selecting this option here. Okay? If I hover over it, it says X-ray joints. What that's going to do is essentially turn my character a little bit see-through, right? Or rather, it's going to push the X-rays to the top of the surface. So I'm just going to select X-ray in all of my views, just so I can see how well that skeleton is coming together. Okay, now the front view would be the obvious choice to start building your skeleton in, correct? Right. But when we create our skeleton, we're going to start with that root control and work our way up the spine. That's going to form the basis of our character. And we're going to create that chain for the spine. It's really important that we make sure that that spine is bang on in the middle, exactly 0 on the x-axis, okay? So if we create it in the side view, we're guaranteed of that. If we create it in the front view, we can guarantee that that joint is going to align 100%. It's going to be 0 on the x-axis, which we're not too worried about right now. Okay? We want to make sure that it's bang on the middle of our character. So I'm going to hit spacebar and open my side view up. And now I'm going to spend a little bit of time in my side view. We're going to hang out here together for a little bit and build ourselves a little bit of a spine. I'm going to turn my topology wireframe on just so I can see my topology, see where some of these edge loops are. And that will actually help me dictate and decide where I'm going to place my first joint. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the first joint that we want to create is our root joint, or our center of gravity. That is going to be the parent of all the joints above it. It has no direction. Okay? Everything either side of it will have direction, but it is a joint on its own. It just exists. Okay? So we're going to go skeleton, create joint. Now I want you guys to all do this with me. So skeleton, create joints. And I want you to find where you think the center of gravity of your character is. Okay? Find the middle of your character. Okay? If you put your joint out here, that's rather large. We'll resize that soon. But if you put your joint out here, that's obviously not inside your character. Okay? That doesn't make sense. If you put your joint here, your character is going to feel a little bit off balance. You want to try find a nice central position in the middle of your character and somewhere not too high. Okay? If you need to, stand up, put your hands on your hips, shake your hips around a little bit, then bend forward and backwards with your upper body, and you should be able to work out approximately where the midpoint is on yourselves, on your bodies. That might help you find the point on your character. So I think my character has some quite low-lying hips. Through here, he's got quite a baggy shirt, so I'm imagining his center of gravity is going to be about there. Yeah. And I'm going to jump out of my side view. I'd like you guys to stay in your side view, but I'm just going to jump out for a second and show you just how that's aligned perfectly in the middle of my character. I'll turn my grid back on so you can see. Transparency. So that's aligned perfectly on 0x. Okay? It does have translation Y height and it has a bit of depth, but that's absolutely fine. Okay? So back to our side view. At the moment, this joint is huge. Okay? So I'm going to change the radius, and I can do that over here on the right in the channel box. Some of you, your joints will be very tiny. Others, they're going to be humongous. So you just need to adjust your radius accordingly. I'm going to pull mine down to 0.2 to start with. Actually, I'll go 0.1. And now I'm going to work my way up the spine. Yes? It's not what, sorry? Did you try and key it? I'll come and have a look shortly. Just bear with me for the time being. We're going to work our way up and insert the spine joints. Okay? On my character, I'm going to stick with a fairly generic number. Okay, so the first joint I'm going to create is going to be spine 1. So this joint that we've created is the root. I'm going to create this joint here, which is spine 1, which is resized to 0.5. I'll ignore that for the time being. And then I'm going to create a few more joints up to the base of the neck. Okay? So I'm going to create it's a little bit tricky to see with them at this size. In fact, let's just fix that really quickly. We're going to double click on the joint tool and open up the joints over here. We can actually change our short bone radius here. Okay. I'm just going to change mine to 0.1. And from now on, the joints that I create should be a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to go and I'm just going to throw a few joints in really quickly. What am I doing that is slightly different to the skeleton that we have at the front of the room? Yeah, so Andre picked it up. The spine is straight through the middle of my body rather than favoring the back. Okay? The reason being is that we don't want our character to rotate around from the back of their body. We're going to end up with some really weird deformations, some really weird poses on our characters. So if we have the spine going up the center of the mass, we actually end up with a much more posable and therefore a much more appealing character. So I've just created a few joints running up to the base of the neck. So I have, and I'm just going to hit enter, okay? And that's going to confirm my joint chain. I'm just going to quickly resize this root back down to 0.1. Now you'll notice that I created the first spine joint very close to the root control, or the root joint rather. That is because the root joint is not going to have any of my geometry assigned to it, but my spine joint is. So I want that spine joint to sit really closely to the root so that it absorbs all of the root's influence, basically. And generally, you want your spine joints to be nice and even. At the moment, mine aren't so much. So I'm going to go in, and I'm probably going to insert another joint as well. So I'll show you guys how we can do that. But I'm going to start actually moving some of these around. Before I do that, I need to talk a little bit more about the hierarchy of these joints. This is currently an FK setup, which is stands for forward kinematics. Okay? What that means is that every child of every parent, whatever the parent does, the child does. Okay, it's just like real life. You know, when you're young, if your parents go out, they need to take you with them. So if we were to move this parent here, it's going to take all of its children with it. Okay, so if we move this root, it's going to take the whole spine with it. If we move the child on the end, it has no children of its own, so it moves on its own. As a general rule, we don't translate joints, and we try not to rotate joints while we're setting them up. Okay. Instead, what we're going to do is if we need to reposition any joints, I definitely need to reposition this guy on the bottom, or this guy in the middle, sorry. We hold D on our keyboard, and that allows us to, we hold D on our keyboard, that allows us to move just that joint and not its children and not its parents. So we're just moving that joint. That doesn't affect the chain. And I'm actually going to grab that spine joint and lower it down towards the root ever so slightly more. And trying to keep them fairly in the middle of my character's body. And I'd like you guys to do the same. Make sure that you've got a nice even amount of joints. I'm actually going to space mine out a little bit more so I can insert a joint as a bit of a demonstration. Cool. So once we get to this point, I realized that I needed another joint. Okay? I probably don't need another joint, but I want another joint. I'm going to insert one just in the middle right here. Okay. Now, what I could do is go into my my outliner. We'll open that up here. What I could do is hit Shift and then click plus on this top level joint, and it will expand, and we'll see that I now have 6 joints that are all parented and grouped under one another. Let's say that I want to unparent joint 4 from joint 3 so I can insert a new joint. Now, there are a couple of ways that I can do this. I can either go Edit, Ungroup, but that's going to mess up my rig quite a bit. The easiest way to do this is using the middle mouse button on your outliner, clicking joint 4, holding down the middle mouse button and just dragging it to somewhere else on your outliner. And that'll actually separate them, and you'll notice now that there is no connection between joint 3 and joint 4. Joint 3 is no longer the parent of joint 4. Joint 4 is its own being, its own boss, basically. Okay. And we can reconnect those really easily just by doing the exact same middle mouse buttoning joint 4 onto joint 3, and we get that joint back. Okay. So we could do it that way. Sorry, you've got to. Okay. So I will make my way around soon. I'm going to be letting you guys go on and build the rest of your skeleton shortly. This bit here, I want to insert a new joint. So I'm just going to go skeleton, insert joints. And I'm just going to click. Oops, added a few too many there. I'm just going to add a joint there. And what that's done, I've added 2. Let's try that again. What I've done is I've added another joint, joint 7, okay? But it has aligned itself with joint 3, I think. Yeah. So what we need to do is just holding D on our keyboard, move that up into position, and we have ourselves another joint, which is really, it's a lot easier to insert joints than it is to take them out, especially when you start getting into when you've actually started to build a structured rig. I know some of you guys are looking to do some rubber hose setups, in which case I encourage you guys to just build the basic rig first, make sure that you're comfortable with that, and then insert joints later on. All right, so now that we've got those in position, we're going to jump across into our front view, have a little look, and there we've got a spine that's perfectly aligned up the middle of our character's body. Cool, I'm pretty happy with that so far. One thing that I have noticed though, is that this joint here, joint 5, that's the joint that I want to be my chest, is sitting a little high at the moment. Ideally, you want this joint here to be in line with the center of your arm, where it joins with the side of your body. So I need to lower mine down ever so slightly. I'm going to hold D on my keyboard and move that down to where it should be. I'm going to go back to my side view and just adjust my joints accordingly. Make sure you're clicking the translation arrows and not the rotation gizmo. Just aligning my joints a little bit better. Something a little bit more like that. I will actually pull this joint back a little bit because I kind of want it to be in the center of the arm. I'll grab this guy and pull him back slightly, ever so slightly, but I do want a majority of my spine to be through the middle. So I'm pretty happy with that for the time being. Once I've done that, the next step for me is to build a set of arms, right? So I'm going to go into my front view this time. And all I'm going to do is go skeleton, create joints, and I'm going to breeze through this really quickly. I'm not going to create hands. I'm just going to create clavicle, shoulder, and a wrist. Probably create an elbow as well, I guess. Probably need that. So this is the chest, okay? And I want my arm to be connected to this point. So where this point rotates, I want the arm to follow. So this is going to be the parent of the clavicle, and I'm going to put the clavicle, let's turn on my topology. I'm going to put my clavicle about here, I think. Yep, somewhere about there maybe. I'm going to put my shoulder joint about there in the center. I want it in the middle of that edge loop. So see how I've got the 3 edge loops there? I want that to be in the middle of those edge loops. That'll give me the maximum amount of efficiency when deforming this character in animation. And then I'm going to add the elbow joint, and I can create a straight joint by holding Shift on my keyboard and clicking in the middle of those edge loops again. And I'm going to hold shift once again, and I'm just going to click out to approximately where the wrist is. So I'm just going to click somewhere about there. I'll adjust that one later when I build the hand of my character. And I've created an arm. But it's not connected. Can anybody tell me, and I'm not going to continue until somebody answers, but can anybody tell me how I might, using the outliner, connect joint 8 to joint 5? Yeah. Grab joint 8 with the middle mouse button, drop it over joint 5. Perfect. And just to show you how that might work, I don't really want you guys to do too much of this while you're building it. But if I was to select this in animation, it would allow me to start rotating my character's arms around, right? And what I should be able to do is, if I was to select all of these joints, to start getting a character that can rotate side to side. So just imagine that that geometry is going to start following the nearest bones to it. Suddenly I've got a character that I can start to animate with. I'm just going to talk really quickly about creating the leg, which is very much the same as the arm, okay? Almost exactly the same, except that this clavicle is a hip. Okay? So we're going to zoom in on the leg. I'm going to go skeleton, create joints. But this time, I'm going to click Control and select the root joint. I'm going to jump into my side view. And I'm going to create another joint. Holding Shift, I'm going to create another joint. Oops. Okay, not holding Shift, it's a bit spazzy. And I'm going to create it just below the root joint. Can anybody tell me something different about this joint that I've created to the ones above it? It's pointing down. Exactly. We've just changed the direction of these joints. We've changed the direction of this joint chain. So this root, if it was to move, will move the legs with it as well. Okay. We're now going to go into our side view. And you'll notice I've only created one arm. I'm only going to create one leg as well. I'm going to find the hips of my character, which I think are somewhere around here. Yeah. So I'm going to say my hips are about here because he's got quite a baggy shirt on. Hips are about there. And then I'm just going to drop down to his knee, which is there, down to about where his ankle is. And now I'm going to go back to my front view, my side view. Come down, and I'm going to create a joint here for the ball of the foot, somewhere around there. And I'm going to create a joint for the toe. Now the joint for the toe is a peculiar one. It needs to be further, and I don't have a great demo model, it needs to be in line with the furthest point of your model, but in contact with the base, in contact with the ground. So if you had a character with a pointy toe that went up like that, yours would align with that point and then drop down to the base of the world. And mine's just going to go sit on that edge right there. Okay. And then I'm just going to hit enter to confirm that. I'm going to select my knee joint, my ankle joint, holding D. I'm just going to pull it back a little bit because that's a little bit out of alignment. I'm going to select my knee joint, hold D, and I'm actually going to pull that forward a little bit. Because we want our legs to we want it to bend in a particular direction, right? We want this leg to be able to bend forward. Be able to bend like a regular human leg. If we had our leg joints bent that way, Maya's going to tell this joint to rotate upwards, which is going to result in our foot touching our crotch, basically, up here. Okay? It's going to be a reverse bend. So we want to pull it back ever so slightly in front of the center, favoring the kneecap. Okay? And we want to do the exact same with the elbow joint. The easiest way to do that is to go to your top view, hitting spacebar, select that joint, hold D, and you just want to push it towards the back a little bit. We want to create a bit of a bend in the arm so that we get that nice natural bend through our elbow. Now, something that I've noticed with my character, looking at this, is he has really, really long thighs. Right? He has a really long upper leg and a really short lower leg. So either A, I need to raise these edge loops, which I think are his knee, or B, I need to pull his whole spine and his hips down. Okay? I'm probably going to go with B because I don't want to change the model. So I'm just going to grab some of these joints, hold D, and move them down a little bit. I'm just going to move the hip down a little bit as well. And jump into my side view and just space those spines out. Spine joints out a little bit more. Oops. Now, if you find that every second click you're actually accidentally selecting the geometry, now is the time where you can start to put that geometry on a layer temporarily. So I'm going to select this geometry, create a new layer, and I'm just going to call this Hector Geo, and I'm going to save that, and I'm just going to turn it to a reference so I can't select it anymore. Cool. All right, last but not least, at the moment, these are a mess, these joints. If we expand these all the way out in our hypershade, now you'll notice that there are two chains. Joint 1, which is our root, is the parent of joint 2 and joint 12. Joint 12 being our hips and our pelvis, joint 2 being the base of our spine. So if joint 1 moves anywhere, it takes the whole skeleton. Okay? That's correct. That is good. Now what we need to do is rename these. Now, as I mentioned earlier, naming conventions are hugely important. So just make sure you're double clicking on everything. In the outliner, rename these. You want to start with the prefix JNT, which is this shortened joint. Okay, JNT underscore that joint name. So this is JNT root. The next one up will be JNT. You can either call this spine 1 or waist, totally up to you. I'm just going to call it spine 1 underscore, let's just go 1, joint 2, so this is spine 2, and so on and so forth. This one here is JNT pelvis, and the last one here, this one here, sorry, is JNT hips, or hip, but this is the left side of my character. So I'm going to call this JNT hip underscore